People have sex to enjoy themselves. That's a no-brainer.
Why is it that a lot of young people across the globe have sex? It's because they're looking for a pleasurable interaction and relationship with a partner.
So why do you want to scare them when they want to enjoy themselves? Speak their language, tell them what they want to hear.
When I was, as a 20-something-year-old, looking online for information, I had access to peer-reviewed journals, I had access to, online resources, but most things that were being shared with us, or you could have access to, was basically telling you once you had some bad events happen to you in your life, that's it. You're gonna forever be suffering, and the best you can get to is at, you started off at 0, everyone else is gonna have all this pleasure. You, my friend, might be lucky to get back to 0. And I thought there's just gotta be a better way than this.
Para nosotros es fundamental ofrecerle a los jóvenes la opción de ver la sexualidad y el placer como un derecho.
Ooh, that was a hard sell. When we were having events and we were so open about talking about sex, and we were not saying, oh, you'll get HIV or you'll get pregnant, you have to enjoy it, you can ask, there's issues of consent. I think for the first couple of, maybe it was a year and a half, everyone was like, what are you guys on about?
Imagine being a boy or a girl searching for information on sex. Which article would you read? Condom use prevents infections, or 10 ways to spice up your sex life with condoms.
I've been to many conferences, events where we talk about sexual and reproductive health and rights, and we talk about teenage pregnancies, we talk about sexuality, we talk about sexual transmitted infections, but for some reason no one was really talking about this big elephant in the room, which was, well, we need to address pleasure when we want to engage young people when we talk about sexuality.
I was invited to a conference, a youth conference on adolescents' health. And I told them I will come, and I will also present to you a prototype of Love Matters Arabic. We were not online yet. And the organizer of the conference, he said, yes, come, but please don't talk about, or don't mention the word sex. I said, fine.
So I think the genesis of Love Matters was after I had had an 8-week break from work. And I'd spent that time not doing any research, not really thinking about what I was going to be doing, but clearly doing a lot of sensing. And during that time was noticing a number of trends. This is 10 years ago. Connectivity, how people are using their phone, the spread of mobile phones, the spread of porn, the success and popularity of porn. I was learning more about the Dutch approach, a non-judgmental approach, pleasure positive to sexual health and rights. And was standing on a train platform one day thinking, gosh, all these things coming together, there's something very meaningful behind this. There's an opportunity. Can we use what we're learning from these very different areas and bring them together to somehow create a platform where people could get non-judgmental, pleasure-positive information about sexual health and rights in places where that kind of information was really hard to come by. So at the end of my 8-week mini sabbatical that I took free from work, on that last day, I put in a 1-page proposal, and it was basically for platform Love Matters.
Do you remember your first crush? The first time you fell in love? The first time you had a orgasm? What about the first time you thought the condom broke? Who did you tell? Your friends? Parents? What about a nurse or a doctor if you had the services available? But what if talking about love, sex and relationships in your society was taboo? Who would you have turned to?
One of the first collaborators that I met along the way was Michelle Shakalakal. And she came from a public health background, had a keen interest in working on sexual health and rights, and right from the start really brought in a great professional perspective on pleasure positive.
I went to school here, actually in Amsterdam. I went to school at KIT, the public school of health. And what I found out is that no matter how much you study the ins and outs of sex, death, and disease, and that's partially what you do when you study epidemiology, you don't get love, life, or happiness. I don't know why, but you just don't. And what I found out was that we're focusing on the wrong things. Or I felt the things that we were focusing on were how to avoid things, as opposed to things that you actually wanted in your life. And one of those things I wanted in my life was pleasure.
I think I was one of the earlier purveyors of this pleasure-positive approach. I had seen the Pleasure Project outside of Love Matters have an approach that was quite racy, but I could understand for us, we needed to be a bit more culturally sensitive. So, the gist was I was a person who, in theory, the websites and social media platforms could have been targeting. And I was tired of getting information that was about bad outcomes, like unwanted pregnancies, abortions, how you could die of a deadly disease. All of this was true, and yet it didn't tell me more things that I wanted in life. I wanted to learn how to have a safe and healthy and satisfying relationship.
I was coming from a media background. For me to make sex appealing and engaging was rather simple. If you're coming from a public health background and you understand how the sector has medicalized, made this a very heavy, disease-ridden topic, it's much more challenging. And she was one of those rare people from a public health background who was able to see a real future and way of doing this in a way that met professional standards.
The more I delved into it research-wise and my personal reflection was that there just had to be a better way. Like, if you wanted to talk about female genital mutilation or cutting, there are about 200 million women and girls globally that have been cut or mutilated. Our only message can't be all of those women and girls have no hope because they've been cut. And our other message can't only focus on we should prevent this. We also need to take into account what has already happened and how could you reclaim your body after an event like that? And what would you do to have a satisfying relationship? How could you have pleasure? And surprisingly enough, back then there wasn't that much research out there, partially because it was taboo, and the other part was it wasn't fashionable. But yet, having come from an experience of being a survivor, not of FGM, but of other events, I really want to know how could you thrive.
तेरा मेकअप खत्म ही नहीं होता यार. ये क्या कपड़े पहन के आई है तू? Are you on fucking sale or what? जा रेड कार्ड भी बना ले अपना. Enjoy your life, you deserve the best. Oh, you deserve the best. Remember to stay safe and protected. Oh na 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 na. We'll be right here if you ever need our counsel. 'Cause you matter to me. Your love matters to me. Love matters, Naija. Matters to me. Your love matters.
For Nigeria being the largest country in Africa, donors found the need from research that young people in Nigeria were largely unattended to, that young people in Nigeria needed most of this information, that Nigeria had a large unmet community where they needed to get support, they needed to get the right information, where they needed to get the pleasure positive aspect of sexual reproductive health and their rights.
I think that demystified the issue of sex, that removed the whole medical aspect of it, and it just made it easier to have conversations about sex.
It really was about using pleasure as a hook and making sure that you hooked people in those conversations, and then you were able to talk about everything, all the questions that they feared, everything that they feared, talking about their bodies, their sexuality, just everything.
असली मर्द ही लगा सकता है लड़की की वर्जिनिटी का पता, सही या गलत?
बिल्कुल गलत. ना कोई डॉक्टर या डिटेक्टिव लगा सके ये पता. क्या?
I think that really was the challenge. Like, how do you make that connect? And then I think doing it in a way which was non-preachy. You know, as the tagline of Love Matters says, we are open, we are honest, we are non-judgmental, and really bringing that to life.
So there was a pleasure and a pain dynamic that I wanted to address. They needed to be space for both. And that lens of like including polarities came to be also when we were talking about our websites, the language and also the kind of people you would see. It was super important to me and us to make sure that what you saw on our websites was reflective of the population that we were serving.
There is the right age to have sex.
There's nothing like a right age.
Maturity and understanding that one has to have.
The drinking age is 18, with right to vote, right to marry for girls, 18.
Doesn't necessarily come with age all the time. This is when you're aware of what you're doing.
When you are mentally mature and you're ready to do it.
Above 20 or 21.
16,
14 plus. So I think in our society, 18, 19, 20 is good.
No 18, no 17 or no 19.
18 was.
So one of the primary reasons, to think of a project like Love Matters was to really, one, understand and acknowledge how young people and their sexual and reproductive rights were looked at. What did the landscape really look like, right? In terms of the information that was out there, in terms of what the organizations were doing, and to really see what were the gaps and challenges. And globally, of course, when we were looking at young people, we know that, especially in India, where young people are not seen as autonomous human beings. They're not seen as individuals who can think about themselves, who have the ability to process information and take right decisions for themselves. There was a huge gap and a huge need for something like Love Matters.
Les gens préfèrent nous poser des questions inbox que de le poser devant tout le monde, soit sur une publicación.
Si ahorita sigue siendo la sexualidad un tema tabú, pues en nuestra adolescencia o en nuestros años atrás, hablemos de años atrás, era mucho más fuerte la postura frente a este tema.
Sex is taboo. Sex is still taboo. People don't talk about sex. To their young people. So young people discover about sex from the internet, from friends, from hearsay, from experimentation. So it's still happening.
On s'est dit, par exemple, entre amis, dans des groupes WhatsApp, les gens se posent des questions et écoute un peu là, j'ai eu certaines blessures, quand je faisais l'amour, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas de danger? Je me dis waouh, donc si celle-ci a connu ces problèmes, ça prouve qu'il y a 2, 3, 4 ou 5 personnes, pourquoi pas même 100 personnes qui connaissent aussi ces mêmes problèmes.
Again, the research showed that many young people were not, communicating with their parents nor their wards. Nigeria, with a population of, let's say, 250 million, and young people are about 70% of that. And they are also very active in the digital space.
The sex is still taboo in Chinese society. Chinese parents never talk about sex with their kids. This is the reality, and half of Chinese young people, they never have this kind of sex education in schools. That's why most of the Chinese young people, they get this SR/HR information from the digital space, mainly porn, or the hearsay from their schoolmates or maybe from their friends.
如果说一心相惜，下算是一般容易，那同性相拥需要多大勇气与毅力？有太多空洞偏见，其中包括过去我自己以为成就的驾驭长心定制了爱的意义，可能异于常人的选择不是你我所向往的机遇，它基于新时代的理解与尊重，想象也不该指手画脚别人的生活，害他们只能藏于地下变成羞耻般的秘密。
Para los jóvenes, actualmente el saber de sexualidad, sus fuentes más próximas suelen ser entre amigos, ¿no? Y sí, y es algo que somos reiterativos en esto de hacerles saber que a veces los amigos tienen muy buena intención, nos quieren apoyar y quieren darnos información, pero a veces no es la mejor información, ¿no? Y otra fuente que tienen ellos para saber o conocer sobre salud sexual y reproductiva es el porno.
Si lo que quieres es proteger a tu pajarito o pajarraco, lo que debes hacer es aprender a usar un condón.
Pajarraco, neta.
Pues sí, ya sabes, cuando el tamaño... Bueno, no importa. El chiste es que el condón te va a ayudar a protegerte de enfermedades de transmisión sexual, como por ejemplo el VIH, o de embarazos no deseados.
Es muy importante tener mucho cuidado con ellos. Nada de tenerlos cerca de objetos punzocortantes ni expuestos al sol. Y por favor, chequen la fecha de caducidad.
Sí, no los pueden tener guardados en el cajón desde 1963. Caducan.
It's no surprise that many people find porn as a how-to manual or how-to video, more aptly, of how to have sex.
Before you start, you've got 3 things to keep in mind. Number 1, foreplay. Number 2, foreplay. And number 3, don't forget foreplay.
And what I think was relevant was, while this was known anecdotally, personal lives, not a lot of research had been done to show that in the countries we were operating in, that was a main source of how young people got information.
El condón se pone así.
Lo abren con cuidado, obviamente, para que no se rompa. Lo colocan en la punta del pene erecto, del lado correcto. Aprietas la puntita para sacar todo el aire y luego poco a poco comienzan a deslizarlo hasta abajo. El chiste es que llegue hasta la base y que ustedes también disfruten este momento.
And when we conducted our first Great India Love and Sex Survey in 2015, we had found out that most of the people had watched porn. About 50% of our audience, I think 3,000 people that we had surveyed, had sent or received a dick pic. And this broke through the barrier of saying, hey, this only happens in the West. And every time we did some form of research in-house, we found out that, what we were competing against was actually the porn industry, not other NGOs. And it was time that we figured out how, could porn and porn keyword searches bring people to our site.
Let's move on. Your hands can come in, handy. Up and down and right and left. And don't forget the clitoris. Once she's ready, you could explore deeper.
And that was exactly the question we asked with IDS. And what we found out is we looked at something like 400,000, between 250,000 to 400,000 paid keyword searches. And we found that within about a third of them, quarter to a third of them, were porn keyword searches coming into our site. And when we looked at our top 5 search terms, one of the top 5 search terms was how to make love. And that told us that, you know what? There is a relationship between what people are coming to on porn sites and what people were coming to on Love Matters sites.
الحب ثقافة مش نباحة ليه فاكرينه عيب ربيته الكبت والجهل في العقل الحل ايه مفيش خيار غير انفجار المفاعل المنوي الحب ثقافة مش نباحة ليه فاكرينه عيب ربيته الكبت والجهل في العقل الحل ايه مفيش خيار غير انفجار المفاعل المنوي.
So one story I always loved was from Love Matters Arabic. And it was from a couple who had basically, they had gotten married and they had their first night together. And, as we knew across the Love Matters project, one of the most popular pages was wedding night sex. And because a lot of people enter into marriage without really understanding what is going to happen on that night. So it's a very popular page. And what we understand is that this couple took the laptop with them to their bedroom and used it as a guide and got back in touch with us to tell us that because of our resources on wedding night sex, they had a wonderful start to their marriage.
So when we went online, I recall our chief editor at the time, Bill, his name, I had coffee with him at some point and he said, we're going to launch Love Matters Arabic and that's going to be the real test for Love Matters. because we were entering a very sensitive region where there's a lot of taboo around sex and sexuality. Our strategy at the beginning was to really stay a little bit under the radar, not be too progressive, not be pushing our message, to really sort of understand how are people going to consume our content. And in the very first weeks of Love Matters, I open up the Facebook messages of Love Matters Arabic, and there's this woman from Morocco who sends the page pictures that she took of her own vagina, with the question of, I'm getting married, I've had sexual intercourse with my boyfriend, and now I'm afraid that they will find out that I'm not a virgin anymore. And that was a very wow moment for us, because not only we were just new online, someone trusted the page so much that she sent pictures of her own private parts. And that was really a moment where we realized how important and how much trust with the platform is important. And that kind of triggered us later on to also work with a discussion board, which became a sort of a personal conversation with users in the Arab world, where they asked questions and got answers from experts.
But we went one step further. Luke, one of our team members, contacted Pornhub to see if they would share with us their top, I think 25 or 10 keyword searches for Kenya, because we were looking at our Kenya audience, and that's where the paid keyword searches were coming from. And we found out from them that the keyword searches that were bringing people to Pornhub were slightly different than ours. But what was interesting was that on Pornhub, people were asking questions about love, and on our site, people were asking questions about sex. So there was a little bit of like a strobe effect that, if you were talking about love, somehow it would end up on sex, and vice versa. I think the next step is to figure out how can we talk about having pleasurable sex without it being censored.
I think one of the biggest challenge for Love Matters China is censorship. There are a lot of websites and social media platforms are blocked in China, such as YouTube and Facebook. They are all blocked in China. And this is one of the biggest challenge for Love Matters China from the beginning. Several years ago, our Love Matters China website was shut down, and our social media platforms, some functionalities of our social media platforms are disabled. Some of our content are deleted by the Weibo, Xinlang Weibo company. I have to say the Chinese government and also the local government and also the Chinese digital companies, they are really conservative on the SRHR topics, because the Chinese censors, they cannot distinguish the difference between the science-based SRHR information with pornographic information.
We have a comprehensive sexuality education curriculum that was passed to be used in schools, but again, because of politics, the government stopped the implementation of that. So there's information there, readily available curriculum for across the board, age-appropriate content for each of the age groups that are in school, but the government stopped that.
We've also seen other projects. Of course, we started working already in 2012, and in that period there were other Arabic initiatives to initiate something like Love Matters of some sort. But unfortunately, I know of at least 2 programs that were shut down very quickly, sometimes within the span of 3 weeks, project that was shut down in Egypt, because they went in and took a very progressive and very activist point of view. And I think this is, in comparison to Love Matters and the approach that we have taken, the focus that we have given to talking about medical, scientific information and not address issues like religion. Religion is something we don't talk about with Love Matters Arabic. Our strategy when it comes to religion is that we recognize the role of religion and respect the role of religion in our lives. But we say we are a community that talks about sex and sexuality from a scientific, a medical point of view. We are not, we are not clergy.
The quality of content is to be scientific. You have an evidence about the information you are providing, not only like saying information without any reference or any source. This makes Love Matters Arabic totally different from the information we have in Arabic on the internet. And this is reflected actually because many young people find that the Love Matters Arabic is the only source, the only honest source providing them with information.
अरे छोटा होता मोटा होता लंबा और पतला होता टेढ़ा होता मेढ़ा होता सर्कमसाइज्ड नॉट होता सबको होता प्यारा अपना हथियार दुलारा.
Then what's the problem, bro? Another big thing that challenges young people is there's a very strong, predominantly Christian movement that anything to do with, it might literally just be information about condoms, and they say that giving information to a young person about condoms is encouraging them to have sex. And then they start quoting the Bible. Yet it's the same churches that are saying that parents are not doing their work in teaching their children how not to have sex and they should abstain, yet they know very well abstinence has not worked for the longest time.
We saw young people had questions, but actually a lot of young people then actually also learned that they didn't only need information and content, they actually also really wanted to access a service as a result of the information we gave them. So they were looking for maybe access to a condom, or access to a test, or access to follow-up support. And we've been working with different partners and different service providers, and also really looking at how can we ensure that young people then actually also have access to the services that they need.
Love Matters provides information on sexual health and gender rights for young people, information they can access directly from their mobile phones. We nurture vibrant communities that learn from and support each other. Our partnerships ensure that bridges are built between young people and the services they need. Most importantly, we empower young people to take control of their sexual health and claim their right to sexual pleasure. But we can't do it alone. You can help us support young people in times of crisis and share their happiness in times of joy. Because love matters.
That's why, from the beginning, we have to develop the anti-censorship strategy for this project. We need to diversify our platforms. We have to play the cat and mouse game with the censors. The reason we need to diversify our platforms is because if one platform is shut down by the authority, we still have other platforms. We don't want to be dependent on one platform because it is quite risky.
My biggest struggle, first of all, joining as a social media manager, was the fact that Facebook used to flag our content as pornography. So you'd put up content, the audiences come in, the audience is coming and this is what they want to read. But then we would have posts banned or ads banned, which was really, really frustrating. I think we were lucky for we never had our page banned.
So let's change that, I guess.
Of course, we have other approach to fight for the censorship. One approach we have is the alternative words, because the Chinese censors they will through the machine they will scan the words, and we have to come out with a list of alternative words. For example, the penis, maybe vagina, they are really a sensitive words on Chinese media and Chinese social media platforms. They are the words we cannot use. Instead, we develop alternative words for penis and vagina. For example, we call penis as a little bird or maybe little brother. We call vagina as a little sister. And our young users, they actually understand what we are saying, and they understand these alternative words. So the communication still can flow in, but this is one way how we can get around of the censorship.
Algo que ha pasado constantemente y muy reciente es como ese perfeccionamiento dentro del tema de la sexualidad, ¿no? Como esa evolución que ha tenido la sexualidad en cuestiones de palabras. Entonces, no se dice TS, se dice ITS. No se dice enfermedades venéreas, se dice infecciones de transmisión sexual. Y está bien, o sea, es la evolución que ha tenido el tema y es natural que esa evolución se dé, pero que no sea castrante, que no sea una limitante para yo saber de un tema que por derecho debo tener acceso a esa información, sino que el acercamiento y la diversidad en la comprensión de este tema también se manifieste en la forma en cómo lo hablamos. No hay una forma única de hablar de salud sexual y reproductiva. Si te gusta la forma como lo hace Hablemos de sexo y amor, qué bien. Si te es de aporte, si es de ayuda, qué bueno que puedas conseguir aquí un apoyo, pero hay muchas formas también de manifestar, hablar del tema. Entonces, lo que queremos es incentivar a los jóvenes y que sepan que pueden haber muchas fuentes y que hay diferentes posturas sobre un mismo tema y que está en ellos la responsabilidad, el poder y el criterio de tomar la decisión sobre su sexualidad.
The Next Generation program that kicked off in 2016 really provided Love Matters with an opportunity to consolidate all the learning we had done. So at that point, we had a number of very different platforms that we had created, and each of them had been done, with a similar branding and a similar approach. They were all pleasure positive and non-judgmental, but we hadn't always used the same order of events. We hadn't always learned the best lessons and translated that. There were pockets of expertise all over the place that we hadn't really consolidated. And the Next Generation really helped us to, I would say, refine the recipe of this beautiful cake we had baked.
In 2017, Love Matters Arabic became part of the Next Generation program. We moved most of the operations, all the operations, to Egypt. The team was based in Egypt. We expanded the team, and that gave us much more visibility on the ground.
This project always works best when it's owned by local teams, when it's really driven by a vision that is, fully grounded in the place where it is.
It also gave us a chance to work closely with other partners.
We did quite a lot of collaborations with Love Matters India, Vitika and her team. and sharing of content. I remember we even did a whole campaign on abortion. Like it was a global campaign. We had Mexico on board, we had Egypt on board, we had India on board, Kenya was on board, and so that was really exciting.
And under that program, we also managed to get a legal status as a project in Egypt, which sort of put us a level higher. We were no longer just an online digital platform operated from somewhere in the Netherlands or in Europe. We were actually an actual project with actual staff on the ground, and it gave us much more visibility and credibility.
Every region has taken on its own journey. So while we have the values and principles, of the branch put together, where we all, everybody in every region understands those values and principles. We have the same stand for the issues that we work on, be it LGBT, be it abortion, be it safe sex, sexual pleasure. All of those things are important values and principles for us. And at the same time, as a network, we're all growing in our own directions in terms of how every country, is taking Love Matters in a different strategic direction with these values and principles.
And at the end of that program, you saw that visibility going even higher. Not only we expanded and spread, our community across the Arab world, we were starting to being noticed and being an example for other organizations. So WHO, UNESCO as well, featured Love Matters Arabic as examples of how to engage young people on sexual and reproductive health and rights in the digital space.
العنف والاعتداء الجنسي على الستات في مصر بيحصل كل يوم. وفي الشهور الأخيرة وعبر وجود آليات لنشر الشهادات اللي بتخفي هوية الناجيات في وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي، ظهرت المئات من قضايا الاعتداء الجنسي المسكوت عنها، وقامت بعض الفتيات بتقديم بلاغات رسمية للجهات المختصة. وفي ظل المجهودات المستمرة لمؤسسات المجتمع المدني لمناهضة العنف ضد المرأة، قرر مركز تدوين وموقع الحب ثقافة عمل بحث علمي لتوفير بيانات عن الظاهرة في مصر وقياس مدى فعالية الآليات الحالية للتبليغ والحماية.
We made a social change over the past years. In the beginning, it was very difficult to talk about these sensitive topics, but nowadays, Love Matters Arabic become really a unique project, and many projects in Egypt are welcoming us to work with them and to have together campaigns around many sensitive topics. Like, for example, one of our campaigns this year was about sexual assault. And I think if we go back 10 years ago, no one can talk openly and honestly about those topics. However, we had those problems in community and people have lack of information for them, but there was no Arabic source of information.
وكان التحرش اللفظي هو أكتر الأنواع بنسبة 94%. أما الاعتداء الجسدي فكان بنسبة 72%، و57% منهم اتعرضوا للتحرش الإلكتروني. وكمان كنا حريصين إننا نعرف إيه الأماكن اللي اتعرضوا فيها للاعتداء أو التحرش الجنسي، وعرفنا منهم إن أكتر الحالات بتحصل في الشارع والمواصلات بنسبة 96%، وفي الأماكن العامة بنسبة 58%، وعن طريق الإنترنت بنسبة 54%، و20% من الجرائم دي حصلت في البيت. طب يا ترى المشاركات حكوا عن تجاربهم أو بلغوا أي جهة؟ من خلال الإجابات عرفنا إن 57% من اللي شاركوا في الاستبيان ما حكوش لحد واختاروا السكوت، و95% ما بلغوش أي جهة عن تعرضهم للاعتداء أو التحرش الجنسي. مش بس كده، كمان قدرنا نعرف من الاستبيان إن 50% ما يعرفوش إن في قانون لمعاقبة المتحرش.
And that replication process was the start of the Love Matters global network. That's when we realized we can set up a structure whereby we link all of the different parts of this project and give them a sense of independence and the possibility to move forward sustainably as independent organizations all around the world.
it's very important to keep innovating, to keep finding new ways to connect with young people around love, sex, and relationships. So for us, the program for the coming 3 to 5 years is to put also focus or to keep our focus on innovation.
We really need to be able to present ourselves well in front of different partners and especially donors, because we would only want the network to grow stronger from here and be able to reach out to many, 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 many more young people in the world.
So I feel like our biggest legacy to date is, one, how a group of small people had a huge influence or impact on a large population. And that to me is really, really special. I don't think that comes along very often, actually, where you have a team of 3 and it grows to 70 plus and you scale and you go global. And at the same time, millions of people are reached. That is like an amazing journey.
I hope for the future that this project, this global project, continues to surprise us by telling us what young people are actually doing around the world, and by stripping away our perceptions, our notions, our prejudices, our judgment. I hope we continue to be surprised.
And I'm hoping that our legacy for ourselves and others is that you can tackle difficult subject matter with a lot of love, lightness, and joy. There can be pleasure through it all. And in order to see the light and stars, you need the darkness. So I think, any movement forward would need to acknowledge both sides of the coin, not just the pain. You need the pain and you need the pleasure. You need both.